Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about different leadership styles and conflict. So let me switch over to show the slides. So first of all, leaders in, whether it is in a formal organization or just a group of people working together, a lot of times a leader will come about. And of course, if it is like the boss, of course, that's an official leader. But in other groups, sometimes whether it's just your friends or your classmates, someone will seem to take charge. And there are a few different ways, leadership styles, and we'll all be, at some point, we'll all become leaders, whether it is just for a project, whether it is for work. So we need to understand these different styles of leadership. So in the ones in quotation marks are the ones the way your book talks about it. The other ways, the way I've been more familiar with talking about it, so I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. Highly directive leadership, I've known it as authoritarian. That's where the boss takes charge of everything. The way what you do, you turn to the boss for directions, and the boss tells you what to do. At the most extreme example, think of like some totalitarian country, North Korea or something. It's my way or the highway. There's no room for the people that work underneath the boss to have any say, any choice in the matter. They're the worker drones. They're the ants that just do what they're told. Participatory leadership, aka democratic, is kind of is sort of the opposite. And let's be clear, where it says democratic, we don't mean Democrat and Republican. We mean as in voting. So participatory leadership is where you have the other people that work under the leader have a say. You have a choice. Maybe you're like, okay, what's the best solution for this? And everybody gives their contribution. Everybody, maybe you even do vote. So whereas authoritarian, the boss is the only one that makes a decision. Democratic or participatory, the people underneath have a say. Then the third one your book mentions, I really disagree with this label, negligent. It's more commonly called laissez-faire. And there are two sort of extremes of laissez-faire leadership. One can be negligent. The boss doesn't tell you how to do anything. It's total chaos. I don't know what's going on. What are we supposed to do? I don't know. That's negligent. The boss does not do any leadership. But the opposing side of laissez-faire leadership might be the type of boss that says, I hired you because you know what to do, so do it. And if you don't do it right, I'm going to fire you and hire somebody else. So it is very hands-off. And that can be good if everybody knows what they're doing, or it can be bad if nobody knows what they're doing. So those are the two halves of laissez-faire leadership. And then the fourth one that's not listed in the book, but I'm familiar with and I thought it's worth talking about, transformative. This is sort of like authoritarian, although an authoritarian, you don't want to, you're afraid to disappoint your boss. And transformative, you don't want to disappoint your boss because you don't want to let your boss down. Your boss inspires you. So the boss really is really inspirational. They encourage you to do your best work. So you're working hard because you don't want to let the boss down. Authoritarian, you're working hard because you fear punishment. So those are the different types of leadership styles. Authoritarian, democratic or participatory, laissez-faire, and transformative. So now I want to switch. Now we've talked about that, I want to talk about conflict. Every group has conflict. So how do you deal with it? So these are the 5 different categories of ways of dealing with conflict, and whether these are in a group giving a speech, or they're in relationships, these are the categories. So competing. Do you want to win all the time? Do you always make everything into a competition? Now, I will say that none of these are inherently bad. Sometimes competition can be good. Sometimes it can inspire you to work harder. but sometimes it's not worth it. So you might do accommodating. Accommodating is if you always sort of give in. I think of the example of where you want to go out to eat. Let's go grab something at McDonald's. And then your friend says, oh, I want to go to Taco Bell. And you just give in instantly. Now, sure, in a situation like that, it may not matter. So you accommodate, you give in. But if it's something really important in life, that's maybe not the best way of dealing with it. So if you always find yourself giving in, reconsider that. Maybe you should stand up for yourself. The next one is avoiding. Avoiding is even another step. You just don't want to deal with it. If you don't talk about it, you don't confront it, maybe the problem will solve itself. And again, sometimes that's okay. You're like, I kind of hate it that my neighbors park in front of my house, but if I bring it up, it might be a big deal. I'll just avoid it. I'm not going to deal with it, and I'll just live with it. But otherwise, if it's something like, the person that you are in a romantic relationship with always says mean things to you, you're like, maybe avoiding that's not the best way. Maybe you do need to deal with it. Then we have the last two, compromising and collaborating. If you watch the other video about collaborative versus cooperative, you should already know collaborating. Collaborating is you all come together. Compromise is you sort of meet in the middle. Compromise is I give up something, you give up something. We're not 100% happy, but we can live with it. Collaborating, I think of as like a third way. Let's find something we work together from start to finish, and we're all 100% happy with it. And so collaborating is the ideal, is the best, but it's not always possible. And as I said, sometimes these other things are useful. You just have to know when to deal with them. If the competition becomes negative, you got to step back and say, okay, how are we going to deal with it? If you find yourself giving in too much, maybe I should stand up for myself. Related to the ways people deal with it are the outcomes. What happens when you do when you have the conflict? There's win-lose. That really happens with the competing style, right? One person wins, one person loses. But there's also lose-lose. So maybe, you get in an argument with the person you're dating and you decide to break up. Nobody's happy, nobody wins that conflict. Then there's compromise, which, as we said, you sort of meet in the middle, you give up a little bit, but you can live with it. And then win-win, that's the collaborative. Everybody's 100% happy. So we've talked about leadership styles. We've talked about the ways of dealing with conflict. We've talked about the outcomes of conflict. So keep these things in mind next time you're getting together with your group. Keep these things in mind when you have some problems. See you next time. How do I stop this thing? Stop. Yeah.